Welcome to the podcast to Philip. And today we're diving deep into something I think a lot of you have probably thought about.
Yeah.
Connecting a large language model to your Google Drive.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, think about all the information that's in there.
It's a really hot topic right now, and for good reason. I think
Yeah.
people want to be able to use all that data.
Yeah. And kind of make the AI your own AI, right?
Exactly. Personalized.
Yeah.
Not just this general knowledge, but like
Yes,
your
you.
specific stuff.
Based on what you've written and what you saved. And yeah.
Absolutely.
So we've got a bunch of sources that we looked at, and there's kind of two main paths that emerge, and we want to dive into both of those.
Okay.
One is fine-tuning, and then the other one is Retrieval-Augmented Generation, RAG.
Mm-hmm.
And
They each have pros and cons.
yeah, one is more resource-intensive.
Right.
Fine-tuning is, but it's potentially more powerful.
Yeah, if you have that computing power,
Right.
you can really get it to be an expert on your data.
Let's talk about fine-tuning first.
Okay.
So basically, this is retraining the LLM using your specific Google Drive documents.
Right. And this requires, some pretty serious computing power.
Yeah.
Often GPUs are involved in this kind of training.
So this is not like something you just do on your laptop.
No, it can be done on your laptop for very small models and small data sets.
Okay.
But if you really want to use a large language model,
Yeah.
you're going to need a much more powerful computer.
So let's walk through what this looks like to fine-tune an LLM using your Google Drive data.
All right.
What are the steps involved?
So just like if you were going to make a really complicated recipe,
Okay.
the first thing you need to do is gather all the ingredients.
Right.
And so that's what we need to do with the data. We need to collect all the relevant documents from your Google Drive.
So you're pulling everything.
Everything that's relevant to the task, you want the model to be able to perform.
Okay, so maybe if I'm writing a book and I want to fine-tune it based on like my writing style,
Yeah.
you'd pull all of my previous books or writing samples or whatever.
Exactly.
Right.
And this is where something like the Google Drive API could come in handy.
Oh, this is getting technical.
It is a little bit technical, but for those listeners who are interested in automating this process,
Yeah.
the Google Drive API allows you to programmatically access and download all of your files.
That's pretty slick.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've gathered all the information.
That's step one.
Then what?
So then we move into pre-processing.
Okay.
This is where we clean up the data,
Okay.
remove any typos, any formatting inconsistencies, just make sure that the data is all nice and clean so the model doesn't choke on it.
So you're making sure that the AI can understand it.
Exactly.
Okay.
After that, we move into tokenization.
Okay.
And this is where we take the text and we break it down into smaller units.
So it can digest it.
Exactly.
Okay.
And these units are called tokens, and they can be words or parts of words or even punctuation marks. But essentially, we're breaking it down into bite-sized pieces.
Got it.
Okay, so after the data has been tokenized, we move into the really computationally intensive part of the process, which is training.
Oh, the AI is like sweating it out in the gym.
Exactly. This is where it's really lifting those heavy weights and learning from your data.
Okay.
So this is where the LLM is actually updating its parameters
Okay.
based on the patterns that it's seeing in your data.
Got it.
And this can take a long time,
Yeah.
depending on the size of your data set and the size of the model.
Okay. And so then after it's trained,
Then we evaluate.
okay,
We see how well it does.
how do you do that?
So we test it on a separate data set that it hasn't seen before,
Okay.
and we see how well it can perform the task that we want it to be able to perform.
And that's how you know if it's actually learned something.
Exactly.
Cool.
And then based on the results of that evaluation, we can go back and fine-tune it further, or we can say, hey, this is good enough.
So it's like an iterative process.
Absolutely.
That's really neat.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's fine tuning. But like you said, that takes a lot of resources.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the other option.
Okay.
REdge Retrieval-Augmented Generation,
Right.
which is a little bit more, I don't know, user-friendly maybe?
It's definitely more accessible.
Yeah.
It's less about intensive training and more about giving the LLM context at the exact moment that it needs it.
So instead of teaching it everything on my Google Drive,
Right.
you're basically giving it a way to search it quickly.
Exactly. It's like giving it a super-powered research assistant
I like that.
instead of making it an expert on everything you know.
So how does that work?
So the first step is the same as fine-tuning. We need to extract the documents from your Google Drive.
Okay.
But instead of using those documents to retrain the model, we build what's called an index.
Okay.
And an index is basically a way of organizing the information in your documents so that it can be searched very quickly and efficiently.
So kind of like if I had a library,
Yes.
I would have a card catalog or something.
Yeah.
That's like the index.
Exactly.
Okay.
And there are special tools that can help us build these indexes. One example is a library called FAOS,
Okay.
another technical one.
A little bit technical, but essentially it allows us to search through a huge amount of data very, very quickly.
So you've got your data, you've got your index.
Right.
Then what?
Then we integrate the LLM with that index.
Okay.
We basically give it access to that card catalog so that when you ask a question, it can go and find the relevant information from your Google Drive very quickly.
Got it.
And then use that information to generate a response.
So it's basically pulling the relevant information from my drive and then using that to formulate its response.
Exactly.
And this is less resource intensive.
Much less because we're not retraining the model.
Okay.
We're just giving it access to the information that it needs at the time that it needs it.
So this is a really good option if you don't have a supercomputer.
Absolutely.
We got it.
And you don't need as much technical expertise to set this up. So we've got fine tuning, which is like you're training a scholar to know your stuff.
Right.
And then RJ is like having a superpowered research assistant who can go find the information that you need.
Exactly. When you need it. And both of these are really valuable, but for different purposes.
Right.
And choosing between them depends on, your resources, your expertise, and the level of personalization you need.
Got it.
If you really need the model to deeply understand your data, and you have the resources to fine-tune it, then that might be the best option.
Okay.
But if you just need it to be able to access your data and answer questions about it, then RJ might be a better choice.
Got it.
Okay.
Before we move on to actually how to do these things,
Yes.
I think there's something that's really important that applies to both of these.
And that is?
Privacy.
Absolutely.
We are talking about giving an AI access to your Google Drive.
Right. And your Google Drive probably contains a lot of personal information.
Yeah, potentially.
Financial information.
Yeah, all kinds of stuff.
So you need to think carefully about the privacy implications of giving a third party access to that data.
Right.
And there are things you can do to mitigate those risks.
Like what?
Well, one thing you can do is you can anonymize your data before you give it to the model.
So strip out any personally identifying information.
Exactly.
Okay.
And another thing you can do is you can use a privacy-preserving technique, like differential privacy, which adds noise to the data in a way that protects the privacy of individuals.
That sounds pretty complicated.
It is a little bit complicated, but there are tools and libraries that can help you do that.
Got it.
And then another option is to use an open source project like PrivateGPT, which is designed to run LLMs on your own computer so that you don't have to share your data with anyone.
So you have total control.
Exactly.
That's neat.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about fine-tuning and RAG.
Yes.
And some of the privacy implications of both.
Right.
Now let's actually get into how to actually implement this stuff. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
So let's start with the GRAGgy, since it's generally more accessible.
Yeah.
And we've talked about the concepts.
Right.
But I'm sure people are wondering, how do I actually build this thing?
Yeah, how do I actually do it?
So the key is really creating that efficient, searchable index of your Drive documents.
Yeah, that was like step one.
Yeah, that's the foundation.
Yeah. Where do we start?
So first, you need to actually get your data out of Google Drive.
Right.
And you can manually download everything.
Yeah, that sounds terrible.
Especially if you have a lot of data.
Yeah.
So again, the Google Drive API can be your friend here.
Oh, so it's more coding.
A little bit of coding.
Yeah. Oh,
but it lets you programmatically access and download your files.
So that's for the more tech-savvy listeners.
Yeah. Or if you're not comfortable with code, there are tools out there like Google Drive Loader or PyAirbyte, which can simplify this process.
Okay, so there's ways to do it.
Yeah, they handle all that connection and downloading for you.
Got it. So you've got your data.
Okay.
Now,
so once you have your documents, you need to divide them up into smaller segments or chunks.
Okay, why?
This makes the data easier to process and search.
Okay.
So instead of feeding the entire document to the LLM, we're giving it these bite-sized pieces.
Okay.
And the chunk size depends on your needs and your data.
Okay.
Some people break documents into paragraphs. Others might use even smaller chunks like sentences.
Interesting.
So once you've chunked up your documents, now we need to transform those text chunks into a format that the LLM understands.
Uh-oh.
And this is where we get into embeddings.
It sounds complicated.
It might sound a little complicated, but essentially what we're doing is we're creating numerical representations of the text
Okay.
that capture the meaning and context of the words
Okay.
in a way that the LLM can process.
So you're turning words into numbers.
Exactly. We're translating it into a language that the LLM speaks.
Yep.
And we need to store these embeddings somewhere that allows for fast and efficient searching.
Okay.
And that's where vector databases come in.
Vector databases.
Yeah, these are databases that are specifically designed to handle these numerical embeddings.
Okay.
And they allow us to do something called similarity search,
Okay.
which means we can find embeddings that are similar to a given query.
Got it.
So when you ask the LLM a question,
Yeah.
the vector database can quickly scan through all the embeddings and find the ones that are most relevant to your query.
So it's finding the right information.
Exactly.
Okay.
And there are several popular vector databases out there.
Like what?
Pinecone Redis are 2 examples.
Okay, so you've got your embeddings in a vector database.
Right.
What's next?
So the final step is to connect our LLM to this database.
Okay.
We need to establish a way for them to communicate so that when you ask a question, the LLM can access those relevant embeddings
Okay.
and give you a smart answer.
Got it.
Luckily, there are tools out there that can help us with this.
Okay, like what?
LangChain Vectorize are 2 examples.
So these are tools specifically for connecting LLMs to vector databases.
Exactly.
Got it.
So it is a multi-step process.
Okay.
But each step kind of builds on the previous one.
Yeah.
And the end result is this really powerful way to use your Google Drive data with an LLM.
That's really cool.
And once you've built the system,
Yeah.
you can adapt it
Oh, really?
for different LLMs, different data sets, different applications.
So it's pretty versatile.
It is, yeah.
Okay.
So that's the RAG side of things.
Okay. So RAG is done.
We haven't forgotten about fine-tuning.
No, let's talk about fine-tuning.
All right, so fine-tuning, as we mentioned,
Yeah.
a little bit more of a beast,
A little more intense.
but it's equally fascinating.
Okay, let's dive into it. Okay, so we're back and we're ready to dive into this this world of fine-tuning,
Yeah.
which is really about deeply personalizing the LLM,
Right. Using your own data.
using your own data so it becomes an expert in your stuff.
Exactly. It's a lot more resource intensive, as we've mentioned.
Right.
But the potential is huge
Yeah.
to have an AI that truly understands your knowledge base.
So when we think about the steps involved, it sounds like it's kind of similar
In the beginning,
in the beginning to ARG.
yeah,
Like
Yeah.
we're still gathering our data.
you're still going to need to get your data out of Google Drive and prepare it.
So those same tools that we talked about, Google Drive Loader, Pyrebyte,
Yep, all those is still relevant here.
the Google Drive API, if you're comfortable coding,
Exactly.
all those apply.
So organizing and accessing your data is really that crucial first step,
Got it.
no matter which approach you're using.
Okay, and then we're still chunking up the data.
We still need to divide those documents into smaller chunks for
Oh,
easier processing.
Okay, so same so far.
So far, so good.
But now it's like we're at a fork in the road.
Exactly. Here's where things diverge.
We're not creating embeddings or vector databases.
Correct. With fine-tuning, we're actually going to use these chunks to retrain the LLM's core parameters.
Okay, this is where I get a little lost.
Yeah, it's where it gets a little mind-boggling.
What does it actually mean to retrain an LLM?
So imagine the LLM as this massive network of connections,
Okay.
and each connection represents a tiny piece of language understanding.
Okay.
When you fine-tune, you're adjusting those connections
Okay.
based on your data.
So you're customizing
You're customizing the AI's brain.
to focus on your information.
Exactly. You're making it specialize in your information.
And how does that happen?
So this rewiring happens through these complex calculations,
Okay.
guided by algorithms that compare the LLM's current output
Okay.
to the desired output based on your data.
So it's like you're saying, here's what you should be saying.
Exactly.
And it's adjusting itself
It's adjusting those connections
to get there.
to get closer to that desired output.
That is really wild.
It is pretty amazing.
So do you need to be like a machine learning expert to do this?
It definitely helps to have a solid understanding of the concepts.
Yeah.
But thankfully, there are resources and platforms that can make this process a lot more accessible.
Okay.
One example is Hugging Face Transformers.
Okay.
It provides pre-trained LLMs and frameworks for fine-tuning.
So it's not completely out of reach?
Not at all. And there's a growing community of people sharing knowledge and tools,
That's cool.
making it easier to learn and experiment.
Okay, so let's say I've done all that. I've gathered my data, I've prepped it, I've chunked it up, and
Right.
fine-tuned my LLM.
Mm-hmm.
How do I know if it's actually worked?
Good question. Just like with any training regimen,
Okay.
we need to evaluate the results.
Okay.
So we use a separate set of data
Okay.
to test the fine-tuned LLM's ability to generate accurate and relevant responses.
So it's like a test.
It's like a final exam.
You're seeing if it learned anything.
Exactly. We're measuring its performance.
Got it.
And then based on the results, we can further refine the process, make adjustments.
Okay, so it's fine-tune, evaluate, adjust.
Exactly. It's iterative.
Cool.
Yeah. And it's worth noting that even with all these powerful tools, fine-tuning is still an art as much as a science.
Well,
It requires experimentation, a good understanding of the underlying principles.
it sounds like both of these approaches, fine-tuning and RAG, they offer some really amazing possibilities
Yeah, they really do.
for people who want to use LLMs with their Google Drive data.
Absolutely. It's incredible to see how these technologies are evolving
It's mind-blowing.
and becoming more and more accessible.
Yeah. Well, this has been a really fascinating dive. I feel like we've covered a lot of ground today,
Yeah.
learned about two very different approaches to this,
Yeah.
and hopefully our listeners feel empowered to start experimenting a little bit
I hope so.
with these tools.
Absolutely. There are so many resources available online.
Yeah.
And just remember, this is really just the beginning. These technologies are still evolving, so stay curious. Keep exploring.
Yeah. Who knows what you'll discover? Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of LLMs and Google Drive.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning.